Today, there is important news from the Kupyansk direction in the eastern Kharkiv Oblast. Here, after weeks of repeated claims by the Russian political leadership that Kupyansk city had been captured, reality hit hard. The Ukrainians recently demonstrated that the town was not under Russian control at all, but had been quietly cleared of enemy forces, prompting President Zelenskyy to visit Kupyansk in person. The operation began with a carefully planned campaign aimed at isolating Russian forces inside and around Kupyansk through devastating airstrikes. Ukrainian air power focused on preventing reinforcements from crossing the Oskil River and sustaining the Russian bridgehead north of the city, cutting the lifeline before moving in on the town itself. Geolocated footage shows a Ukrainian F-16 striking Russian troops near Kryanivka as they attempted to move across the river. The second stage targeted the land corridor south of Dvorichna, which Russian forces had been using to infiltrate Kupyansk, where Ukrainians aimed to create a bottleneck around the town. Ukrainian assault teams moved in, clearing forest belts and structures one by one. Geolocated combat footage shows Russian soldiers being eliminated or captured, providing Ukrainian commanders with valuable intelligence on enemy plans and remaining force dispositions. Russia attempted to counter this by pushing reinforcements across the river, but at extreme difficulty and high cost. Up next, Ukraine is escalating its campaign in the Black Sea into a de facto blockade, targeting Russia's shadow fleet and crippling key oil export infrastructure. In response, Moscow has begun accusing European nations of direct involvement, threatening retaliation as it scrambles to break a tightening noose it can no longer evade through deniability. Here, the central development is the attack on the Dashan, a sanctioned tanker that approached Novorossiysk with its transponder switched off. Ukrainian Sea Baby drones reached the vessel in daylight, and according to Ukrainian sources, caused enough damage to force it out of rotation. However, Russian commentators immediately focused on the British RC-135 flying over the western Black Sea, claiming it provided real-time intelligence for and directed the strike through Ukraine. Whether Russia's accusations are true or not, Ukraine's allies supply surveillance and situational awareness, allowing Ukraine to execute the countless successful strike campaigns they have over the course of the war, greatly undermining Russia's military and economic capabilities while staying clear of international red lines. This context is essential because whether Russia exaggerates Western involvement or not, Ukraine is doing Europe a major favor. Russia continues to evade sanctions by renaming vessels, switching flags, sailing dark, and operating a shadow fleet that makes enforcement of sanctions packages extremely difficult. Europe needs legal processes, investigations, and regulatory decisions to respond, which means Russia almost always acts faster. One current case shows a German court refusing to allow the seizure of a damaged Shadow Fleet vessel due to concerns of legal retaliation from Russia or others. Ukraine does not face those constraints. It can strike tankers directly, as with Dashan, and it can seize vessels that drift into its ports, such as the Ghost ship recently detained after it had ironically sailed into the harbor of Odessa after repeatedly changing identity while carrying grain from Russian-controlled Crimea. Aside from aiding in the prevention of sanctions evasion, several Shadow Fleet vessels have been linked to aggressive GPS jamming, affecting aviation and shipping all around Europe. By taking these ships out of circulation, Ukraine reduces hybrid threats as well as illegal exports, effectively enforcing sanctions in a way Europe cannot match without pulling Europe into open confrontation with Russia. At the same time, Ukraine is targeting the ports that sustain this fleet, as recent naval and aerial drone strikes did major damage to moorings and offshore terminals near Novorossiysk, causing the port to completely suspend operations till repairs were made. Now in the Konstantinovsky direction, fighters of the Predator Brigade systematically knock out enemy air targets in their section of the front, preventing the enemy from operating in the skies above frontline cities. Shot down is a Lancet, a Zala Z-16, and several Molnia II drones and a Russian heavy bomber. Next, an amazing update. The SBU hit the jackpot. During the night of the 17th of December, a large-scale demilitarization took place in the temporarily occupied Crimea. Two long-range radar detection complexes, the Nebo SVU, the price of one is about $60 to $100 million. A 92N6 radar, which is part of the S-400 Triumph anti-aircraft missile system, approximate price for the domestic market is $30 million, export price is $60 million. Also a Pantsir S-2 anti-aircraft missile system, approximate price for the domestic market $12 million, and an export price of around $19 million. And last but not least, a MiG-31 aircraft with a full combat load, approximate price $30 to $50 million, depending on configuration and armament. An amazing strike by the Ukrainian armed forces. Next, another quick update on the submarine attack. At the entrance to the military harbor of Novorossiysk, the Russians sank several barges to prevent any naval drones from passing through, effectively barricading themselves in. But there is another side to this coin. Now their fleet cannot leave either. A brilliant outcome to this amazing attack by Ukraine. And now more information has been leaked from Russian sources. A Russian submarine in the port of Novorossiysk, hit by an SBU drone, has started to leak, literally. Fuel and lubricants are leaking into the sea from the Varshavyanka-class submarine. In addition, the rear part of the boat is half submerged. As I reported earlier, the armored hull was punctured and 2 compartments were flooded. The photo shows the layout of the objects and calculations of the critical pressure limits that resulted from the explosion of the Sea Baby's warhead. Now to the front line. Special Operations Forces conduct direct actions in the forests of the Donetsk region. A group from the 8th Special Operations Forces Regiment conducted a search for the enemy in a wooded area. The footage shows camouflaged positions, a dugout, scattered items, and a generator. This indicates that the enemy used this position, but left it in a hurry. The soldiers approached, saw the enemy's movements, and immediately engaged in combat. As a result, 1 soldier was killed and the rest retreated. Russians continue moving S-300-400 missiles into occupied Crimea. In Kerch, missiles were spotted being hauled through the city center. It's great that the locals provide such good intelligence to the Ukrainians. Now some newly released FPV footage. The Worm Busters Special Unit of the State Border Guard Service punishes occupiers for traffic violations, speeding, illegal parking, and exceeding the number of animals in the passenger compartment. The FPV Wormbusters 414 SBS Brigade controls the kill zone. There is nowhere to hide for the Russians. Next, some footage from the 110th Brigade as they destroy enemy shelters containing Russian troops. Drone pilots of the 110th Separate Mechanized Brigade's Unmanned Systems Battalion continue their effective hunt for the invaders. The enemy tries to hide in basements and various shelters, hoping to wait it out and avoid punishment. But there are no safe places from our drones. They reach the occupiers everywhere, precisely and inevitably. Every shelter becomes a trap for the enemy. Russians have struck Zaporizhzhia. A residential building was damaged, according to the regional military administration. The consequences are being assessed. Ivan Fedorov, head of the Zaporizhzhia Regional Military Administration, also showed the consequences of the strike on a garage cooperative. There were no casualties. Thanks for listening to Ukraine, the Dark and Light. Please like, subscribe, and share.